Hello, this is the Ludoverse Lab, and this is our second session playing the World of Professionals with Ryan Windeknecht at the helm. Last week we were involved in some character creation, and Ryan led us through a little bit of the kind of origin of this game that he's put together for his philosophy classes. But I think we're all kind of seeing ways in which there are definitely kind of applications that could be made into a wide variety of different disciplines with this idea. And we're going to kind of get quickly to it today. And what we're going to do is just quickly introduce ourselves and say a little bit about the characters that we have created, and then we'll end up with Ryan, who will kind of take it from there. And I think we're going to be involved in a little bit of dungeon delving today, so we're looking forward to that. My name is Robbie Borth. I use the pronouns he, him. I'm an English teacher at Trinity Preparatory School in Winter Park, Florida, and I've been playing games since middle school, starting with Dungeons and Dragons. I'm also a big fan of certain strategy games. Most recently, the game of Go has been a particular fascination of mine. But in this game, I will say a little bit because I did fill out a character as well. I'm playing Lucia, who is a paladin with the occupation of being the catchpole, which is a kind of tax collector. I'm imagining Lucia as actually coming from a family of tinkers, but that in her background, that family business was rough and was hardly enough to kind of keep food on the table. And she has kind of learned that the local aristocracy is in need of some hardy souls to become their catch poles, and so Lucia has hopes of being able to kind of take on this type of a new occupation. In terms of her social circle, I imagine being a catchpole does not make you the most popular person in the world. So I imagine that she has a few pets that she keeps as perhaps substitutes, and probably has a couple childhood friends of hers that she still remains kind of close to. But I think she also is somebody who probably feels a little bit isolated, but is willing to make that sacrifice because she sees a certain opportunity in the catchpole tax collecting occupation. And I'm just going to go around my screen as I see it, kind of left to right, top to bottom. So Brandon, that would take us to you next.
All right. I'm Brandon Burmeister. I teach at Trinity Prep in Orlando, Florida. Been playing games most of my life, as long as I can remember. So my character is Earl Castleton. It's a dwarf. All right. He's a tinker, and I kind of thought of I went archetypal here. I kind of thought of like him coming from a dwarf kind of area where like dwarfs were like isolated in their caves, right? And they had a rule where if they leave the cave, they get banished. They're not allowed to leave, right? Business comes to them. They don't go out and seek it. So my guy went out trying to look for new materials to help his shop, got caught, and then got banished. So he just kind of lives a like carny lifestyle, traveling from town to town, selling stuff and fixing problems. As far as social is concerned, he's the type of guy that has a lot of acquaintances but not a lot of friends, and just kind of goes from circle to circle and helps out wherever the money's right and wherever he can continue his journey. And so that's my guy.
Okay. And Sudro, can we go to you next?
Oh yeah. Oh, microphone is on. Okay. Uh, so I am Sudra Brown. I am well. was going to say I'm a substitute teacher in Ventura Unified School District in Southern California, but they just announced yesterday that they're going to be at full distance learning until at least January, which means I'm likely not going to be working at all this fall. But when I'm teaching full time, I do teach English, and have been playing games. Again, I'll echo the the common thread. Pretty much my whole life. Picked up D&D in elementary school, but was already playing board games with my family before that, and it just continued both threads all the way through. I am playing the scribe / wizard of the party. His name is Adeon, and he is an elf. He is from an elven village not far away. And as a boy, Adeon learned to write early and then just didn't stop. Just started writing, and just everything that came into his head, he just loved to write down and scribbled on everything that he could get his hands on. And so it seemed natural to apprentice him to the local scribe. And at this point, he's a fully trained scribe and is the local scribe for Snowcalm, basically recording events, recording contracts. Anything that needs to be written, he's the guy who writes it. He's definitely, however, feeling like he'd rather be doing something more, and so he is definitely trying to stretch beyond that. I think I don't remember if we were going to jump right into our full characters, but he's moving towards being the wizard, and not sure if it's kind of openly or slightly on the sly, is studying the various disciplines that will allow him to graduate to wizardry.
Okay. And Aaron, let's go to you next.
Morning, everyone. I am Aaron, he, him. I am a professor of English, American literature, and I've been playing games for 3 years now, and that is all. I am not special. My character, however, is very special. Her name is Violet, and she is a halfling. And she is an undertaker's apprentice and responsible for the various embalming methods that the undertaker uses. She's grown bored of her work and has started experimenting with the various elements that she has at her disposal. She thinks that her work is divinely inspired by Aletheia, the god of fallacies and unforgetting. She's very personable, but has very few close friends, but she's always talking to people, looking for new lies to tell on Aletheia's behalf, and looking for new things to experiment on.
Okay.
That is all.
All right. That's interesting, having the Undertaker in the midst of us. If things turn deadly, we'll have somebody who can handle things. John, can we go to you next?
Absolutely. I'm John Cassie. I am Director of Curriculum and Innovation at TVT Community Day School. It's Orange County's Jewish Community Day School, an independent school, TK through 12. I have taught history, English, Latin, game design, and entrepreneurship in my career. I'm teaching entrepreneurship right now. I've been gaming forever. Obviously board games and card games to start. Played D&D for the first time when I was like 11 or 12, 1979, and been playing those games ever since. Sort of fell into the role of game mastering, as someone often does, in a party of young people. And now that I basically do that, that's what I like doing that best, game-wise. My character's named Lux. He is not from this village. He's from a neighboring village. of fisher folk, salt of the earth people, right? Always liked making things orderly and being helpful to people. So when he learned that Snowcalm's previous constable had been hexed by a witch who proved to be sufficiently hex powerful to make that hex irreversible, the village needed a new constable. He applied for the gig and got it moved to Snowcalm to be the constable. So, he's a law and order type, right? So, it's not quite as bad as being the catchpole, but or indeed the Undertaker, but being new and being in that kind of role creates a certain dynamic that he's mindful of. So, Robbie, I suspect that our characters are more connected to each other than we are to any others, probably.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And because we were asked to sort of add flavor to other parts of the backstory, I wrote that the witch in question, who irreversibly hexed Snowcalm's constable for reasons that are her own, that witch is also threatening our neighboring village. And so I've got my mind on trying to defeat this local threat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that.
Yeah, I'd also added, I saw that and I added a little bit that, right, one of the things that makes it so hard to kind of pin things on the witch, though, is she has these unwitting agents, right? She's hexing others, right, who kind of do the dirty work, right?
Right.
Although a lot, they're in some ways not really guilty, right? That it's the result of this kind of impulsion that's been placed upon them. But yeah, that she's kind of wanting for unknown reasons to just kind of stir things up and create chaos. But then, she never seems to be caught doing something herself, right? We always have these suspicions, though, that these people start acting strange, and strong suspicions that it could be tied back to the witch, but finding that evidence is sometimes tricky, right?
Right. Yeah. There's no basis in law to arrest her.
Yeah.
Right. So if people are like, well, you're the constable, go arrest her. On what charge?
Yeah.
But we know it's her. Well, absolutely. I agree it's her. Right. But show me the money.
Yeah.
Right. And we've probably questioned various members of the town who were seen doing peculiar things near the well or whatever, right? And they snap out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. So.
Yeah. All right, and then Patrick, we'll go to you.
Great. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Patrick. He, him pronouns. I am in the middle of a PhD program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, studying psychology, experimental psychology. So I like to say that I know a lot about rats, but I don't know anything about people. I'm relatively very new to role playing. I've only been doing it for about a year, but since I've started, and at the same time doing like a lot of like TAing, I've really taken to this idea that role playing can be used for education, and so I'm here because I'd love to learn more about it. My character is Bug. He is a goblin who grew up in a small enclave of vegetarian goblins in the middle of a forest nearby to Snowcalm, where communal living is sort of very much the norm. He comes from a family of cooks and has this propensity for baking, especially sourdough breads. But he became enamored with the hierarchy of the outside world at a young age when traders came to his enclave, and became fascinated with making a living in a world where you have more equity than in a communal living place. So he left and made it about as far as Snow Calm before settling down about 5 years ago.
Okay, good. And then Ryan, so we'll kind of end it with you, but you'll then kind of take it away from there.
So I am Ryan Windeknecht. I use he, him pronouns. I teach philosophy at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And I've been, like most everybody here, I've been gaming for a while. And I've been using games in the classroom since 2016. As I explained to everybody last time, it was a messy start with just throwing a role-playing game into the room, but I've slowly, over the semesters and over the years, started fine-tuning these games to where they still kind of resemble the games that I stole them from, but they've certainly become much more intentionally designed for teaching philosophy in the classroom. And so thanks everybody again for agreeing to play this. I guess this will be the, I don't know what edition of World of Professionals, how many iterations it's gone through. But my plan for today was, so I've picked out a couple of dungeon crawls that we can go through. As I said in my email, I've got one dungeon crawl, and the dungeon crawls for my class, should probably preface this whole kind of session today by saying that, although I'm using games in the classroom, this still is for teaching philosophy. So a lot of what we're going to be doing today, yes, we'll be role-playing, yes, we'll be kind of trying to solve puzzles and having monster encounters, but I am going to at times, slip into game master / teacher and ask for, why are you doing what you're doing? Because in the end, it's not just about kind of what your character is doing, but, that they're doing it because of an ethic, because this is an ethics class. Or in our case for today, because we haven't quite, because we're doing these early dungeons, it's going to be more about trying to imagine what the authors whose readings I've based these dungeons on, like what their arguments are. Right? So for our first dungeon, which is the Kantian dungeon, I had distributed an excerpt from Kant's, it's the kind of the second part of the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals. I trimmed that down to what I hope was a painless 5 pages for those who managed to have time to read it. That's what our first dungeon will be based on. The reason I chose that for our first one, as I said in my email, Kant's not my favorite. I don't think he's anybody's favorite except for Kantians. But the thing is that the way the excerpt's set up and the dungeon I've managed to design around it, it actually has more rooms than I can tackle in a class period. Usually what I do in a class period, so all these dungeons are structured so that they have some sort of very much a gamified kind of reading quiz at the start, where it's you saw from the readings that there are these kind of reading questions. The students also take a quiz that goes with those reading questions before coming to class. And so this first room really is just a gamified version of that reading quiz. And the questions they get on the quiz are just like the ones you saw in your reading, except that the ones in the reading are open-ended. The ones for the quiz are multiple choice. So it's the exact same quizzes, the exact same material, and it really is just for the students to see, like, how much did I get from this before I actually come to class and try to play this game? So that's what we're going to hit, is that first room that's going to have this kind of puzzle that has just to do with the concepts from the reading. All these dungeons are set up after that where they have much more kind of interactive social encounters. And again, these ask you to use the arguments from the reading to deal with whoever you're encountering. The Kant dungeon, because of the way the reading's set up, it has 4 additional kind of encounter rooms. Typically what I do in the classroom is I just have the students roll a die. Whatever pops up, that's the room they end up in. And we usually have time to play through like one room before we call it a day, do a debrief, and that's the end of the class. I think this will work well for us because we have so much time that we can really dig in here and just see how many of these rooms can we get through. I suspect, as I said in my email, that because I'm running for 1 adventuring party and not 5, that it'll go much faster with us than it would in my classroom. If that does happen, if we get through this just super fast, I've also prepped a second dungeon, which is much shorter, but it's based on a section from Hobbes's Leviathan. So it does deal with the social contract. And the encounter room for that is actually based on kind of a very simple prisoner's dilemma. Because one of the things we talk about in class is how Hobbes's thinking influenced kind of rational choice problems like the prisoner's dilemma. So that's the plan for today. I'm guessing we'll just kind of start this Kant dungeon, see how far we've gotten around kind of like the 12:30 mark. Probably take a break around the 12:30. If we've, finished it or almost finished it, we'll have time for the Hobbes. If not, we'll kind of play it by ear and see what we do. Does that sound good to everybody? Cool. All right. So we've introduced our characters. Man, I love that you all put this was, I assigned you homework to play a game with me. You're doing me a favor by playtesting this. I gave you homework and you gave me these character backgrounds, and it pains me so much that if this were the class, we'd get to pull in that stuff and use it every week, and I'd pull in a little bit from here and there. I did. So for those who managed to get it done, kind of either by early this morning, I have managed to work in some of this stuff to our dungeon crawls today. And so we will see a little bit, especially if we get to the Hobbes dungeon. The Hobbes dungeon has the most of it that I've managed to work in. But this is one of the things I try to do is, just like when we're playing games at the table, when the DM takes some sort of story hook we've given them and runs with it, the students love it when you take something that they've given you and actually build it into the game. So I have tried to do that. Like I said, if we get to the Hobbes, it'll be more noticeable there. It's not so much in the Kant. But if we all look at the community sheet real fast, looks like everybody's basically there. There is a map tag, and I tried to slot in on the map stuff that you all had mentioned in your tags that you'd written for me. So you can see on the map that we've got Snow Calm at the center. In Adion's edition here about kind of the history, we had a kind of conflict between these two kingdoms, and Snow Calm had served as the meeting place where they had signed kind of their uneasy peace. And so you can see kingdoms A and B, which we've yet to name. If those were coming into play, I would go ahead and name them, but I think we'll go ahead and just keep moving a bit. And yeah, Sudro, if you want to name those, feel free, since those were your additions to the map here. You can see we've got our witch was mentioned kind of in our introductions there. I have stuck the witch's tower not far from Snow Calm. Although whether she's there or not, it sounds like she's not usually there since she's hard to find or hard to pin down. We have our nearby village of Settle Down just beyond the witch's tower. And we have some natural springs to the northeast that I believe were added by Earl, our future artificer. This is a natural resource for Snow Calm. The natural springs provide this. Actually, Brandon, you want to unmute and explain to us the natural springs?
Yeah, I was going off of since it's Snow Calm, I was thinking like Iceland. So I was going off an idea about being set in the mountains and then kind of a glacial spring that kind of holds down there, plus some volcanic activity that goes on, which would be just a huge amount of fresh water and kind of volcanic springs as well, which are hot. So the people would come to snow from all over the place, but the village itself would be poor. Kind of people would always be flooding through to provide more kind of dynamics.
Cool. So yeah, so those would all be things that we would work in at some point if we were playing more than just today. However, I have placed our two dungeons on the map here. So to the south is an old crumbled kingdom. So it's uninhabited as far as we know. And at the center of it is a building called the courthouse. It's thought around Snowcalm that's where maybe the kings and queens of the court used to reign in this ancient kingdom. But it's rumored that there is a treasure there known as Kant's badge, which paladins need to perform their work. So our party will start by going there to find Kant's badge. As I said, if we have time today, you can see just next to the witch's tower, there is, again, this is an old abandoned, we think it's a noble's house. There's a sign out front. Some of the letters have been worn off, and so Snowcalm just calls it Count's office. But it is rumored here that we can find the merchant's lockbox so that Bug can start down the path to becoming a merchant. So if it isn't clear, at this point, your villagers are just villagers. They're doing their day-to-day occupation, trying to bring in enough to survive, and hoping to start down the path to becoming professionals. And one of the things they need to do is to go off and find these artifacts. So that sort of sets the stage for our crawl. Are there any questions before we get started? Anything not clear at this point? Cool. If at any point you do have a question, just let me know. You can just throw up your hand on your screen and I'll pause. I normally do this in the classroom, so I have PowerPoint slides. So I normally teach through Zoom, and I share my screen, and I've got my PowerPoint slides. I don't know, Robbie, do we have a similar sort of function here? There's a present now button.
Yeah, you can go to the present now.
Does that do like a share screen sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay. We might try that. If that doesn't work, what I've done is I've taken screenshots of there's really only 2 slides that we all need to see. It's the puzzle slides. It's just descriptions will not be able to capture what you all need to see to solve these puzzles. So, but I'll go ahead and I'll try to share my slides then for our first dungeon. Let's see. Let's do a window. Aha. Awesome. All right. Oh, those are... my PowerPoint are not among the things I can choose. All right, so for whatever reason, I have a range of options here of things I can choose, but my PowerPoint slides are not among them. That's fine though. We'll do theater of the imagination for most of this, and then it will allow me to pop up the screenshots I've taken of the necessary slides. So I'll just pop up those slides when we need them. All right, so we'll try a conceit that I use in the spring semester. This might be a nice thing if people have ideas here when we discuss kind of at the end of the session today. If you've got suggestions, I'd be open to hearing kind of like alternative conceits, because I'm not happy with this conceit. But this was this is what I gave to the students to explain why their characters were adventuring together. So you all live in this very tiny village of Snowcalm. There are much larger settlements outside of your tiny village. Some of the places you all have come from might be some of these larger, better known settlements. But kind of across these different steadings, there is a common professional authority known as the Council of Guilds. And they will assemble various people who are training to go or wanting to go into professions to send them off to find knowledge and artifacts that are necessary to go from being in an occupation to a profession. And so this council has assembled you all into an adventuring party. And they have caught wind, as I said, of this Kant's badge that is in this abandoned kingdom to the south. So you all have come together with the express purpose of finding Kant's badge We have 2 paladins. So maybe we'll imagine there are 2 badges down here. And so we're looking for badges for both Lucia and Lux. So the council has given you what kind of sketchy information they have. You've made your way south of Snowcom to this abandoned kingdom. And it doesn't look like any kingdom that you've seen. It is what our characters are considered to be a ancient, like from ages ago settlement, with peoples that don't exist today. The roads are made from some strange like black rock that looks like it's been melted and poured. These roads are all cracked open. The buildings are made from a weird stone and metal and like glass, but like no glass you've ever seen before. This glass you can actually like see all the way through it. It's not opaque in any way. It's completely translucent. It's just a very odd settlement. You make your way to what you've been told is this courthouse where people think kings and queens once ruled from. And as you make your way through this building, you see large tapestries that tell stories. They tell stories of a long ago paladin named Kant. You find books that speak of Kant's categorical imperative. You see large paintings depicting scenes of people lying and people refusing to give charity to others. And so you make your way through this building, noticing these scenes, reading about these things that the Paladin Kant did. And you eventually, this is the first locked door in the whole building that you've encountered. You come to a locked door. This room is surprisingly sparse. There's none of these paintings or tapestries are here. The only thing you encounter in this room is a very large statue in the center. It's of a woman. She is draped in some sort of dress or toga. She holds in one hand a sword, and in the other hand a balance scale with 2 pans hanging from either side. Lux, what do you do?
What do I do? Oh, good grief. Called on in class. Nothing else in the room, right?
Are you just looking around the room just to see if there's anything obvious that jumps out?
Well, I mean, I would. It seems a little like the room is staged in some way, like I'm supposed to draw a conclusion from what's in the the rest of the place has a certain vibe. This place has a very different vibe. It feels like it's constructed or purposeful. And so what I would want to look for is some evidence of what its purpose is, right? You know, is this a magical sculpture that if I stand on is the floor in a certain pattern of tile where there's obviously another pattern of tiles, I should stand on that. Walk around the statue, right? Is there a little descriptive panel on the wall, to interact with this feature, push this button kind of thing, right? So it's that kind of thing, right? It seems like it's intentional. Well, what's the intent? I can't imagine it's hidden. too hard because it looks like it's set up to be interacted with, right? Maybe it's some kind of a weird wizard school kind of jam where you know these people, they always like to auto complicate things, right? So maybe it's some gnomes built this, and so I've got to figure out what their little trick is, or do you see what I mean?
Yes. So
Yeah,
you mentioned the statue several times. If we look at our basic moves sheet, you have a move called Discern Reality. It says when you closely study someone or something, describe what you're doing and why. So I gather that as you're walking about the room looking for the purpose, like I said, you mentioned the statue several times. And so when you're looking at the statue, you're trying to find kind of like, the sign that says, hey, push this button to move forward, or, whatever the trick is.
Right. Is it made of stone, or is it made of something like a medieval styrofoam, right? I mean, is it substantive, or is it nothing, right? Mm-hmm. Is there really nothing on the wall, right? Or is it something that is old wallpaper, or it had been painted 300 years ago, but now most of the paint is sort of hard to discern, that kind of thing, right?
So if you look at the Discern Reality, there is here, I don't think you need, unless you want it, you can get a hint as to what you're supposed to do here. I've given everybody one character token, so you can do one of these moves if you like. However, if you use one of your traits while attempting to discern reality, you can gain a character token. And what that's referring to is really any of those traits on that first character sheet page. The most obvious being like your mental and physical traits. If your ethnicity or gender had any relevance here, you could try to use that. So if you like, otherwise I can just tell you what you see.
I don't see anything on my character sheet that speaks to me of surely the adventuring gear maybe, but I think this is really more a sort of careful study, right? And
is your character erring on the side of caution while he searches this statue?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, rather than sort of a kind of haphazard and disorderly, discursive approach to trying to figure out what the room is, right? I think I would start by sort of creating a plan, a mental map, a structure, right? And I'd start thinking, well, maybe I'd start with the floor pattern, right? The statue is clearly what I'm supposed to interact with, but I'm guessing that the mode is activated or in some other way it's not on the statue itself. So, check the pattern of the tile on the floor, check the walls, and do it deliberately, right? If you're doing police work, if you're constabling, your goal is to get it right, not to get it done quickly, necessarily, right? So I don't mind how much time it takes. It takes however much time it takes, right? So yeah, that would be how I would interpret erring on the side of caution, right? It's more like being intentional and deliberate.
So I will so you can take, I've increased your character tokens by 1 for use of your mental trait there. Sudro, do you have a question?
I actually was going to jump in and see if I could join in with the discerning of reality, since one of my traits is focused on the big picture and looking at the big picture of this building and seeing how does this room fit into that, and does that give us any clue about either the purpose of the room or the the solution to the room, or whether we need to focus on this room at all, or if there's some clue that we've seen somewhere else in the building that would lead us to what our next step is.
Okay. So I think in terms of focusing on the big picture, I don't think there's anything obvious here.
Okay.
Plus, I think while Adion is kind of trying to figure out how this statue fits into the bigger picture, Lux notices that, in fact, there is some sort of plate at the bottom of the statue. And so I'm going to go ahead and share what Lux has found. So Lux has found... Can you all see that? Oh, it's loading now. There we go.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try to make it bigger here. I don't know how big it is on your screen, but let's do a full screen. I don't know if that... Does it go full screen on yours?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, it was good the other way, but better not.
Well, let's go ahead and go back the other way then, so I can see everybody. So you can see there so this is what I've blown up there is a bigger view of what Lux has found down at the base of the statue. So what you found is a plate. It is in fact, more of a stone tablet, and it has 4 words written on it, and some blank spaces below each word. And so we have the word imperatives with 2 blanks beneath that. And then beneath the blank to the right, you've got the word formula with 2 more blanks, the word duties with 4 blanks, and the word goodwill with 1 blank. Now, this probably does, in terms of the big picture, ring some bells for Adion, because these were certainly things that were mentioned as you all searched your way through the dungeon to this room. In reading about the Paladin Kant and seeing some of the scenes from the Paladin's life, these different words did get used. So your task now is to figure out what to do with this particular puzzle. Now, so I'll break from my GM role for a moment here and go a bit meta. If I were doing this in the classroom, like I would kind of like present this to the whole class, and then people would go into breakout groups. So like each party would have their own little individual room in which everybody would just unmute and kind of discuss like what do they think how should we solve this puzzle. So I'll go ahead and just say now that feel free to everybody just unmute and discuss like how we think this puzzle needs to be solved.
Well, I figure we can look at these books, and I don't know if everybody in the party can read or if it's just Adeon who knows how to read, but
everybody has access to the books. They are in the Google Drive folder, and it is labeled Kant.
I'm gonna make a guess that our imperatives are hypothetical and are categorical.
that would be my understanding as well.
Based upon the book.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at both at the same time. So then the formulas. One of those is going to be the universe. This is such a weird word to say. Universalizability principle. And then the second one would be the formula of humanity. As to duties, So there are 4 of them listed here. So the question becomes, is the tablet asking us what we have duties regarding, or what are our duties regarding those? So is it asking us to answer these questions, or is it asking us just to describe what we have there? So I don't know what we'll think there.
Yeah, well, or you could maybe phrase it just in terms of because like in my notes, right? There's kind of these questions about duties, and I was just thinking about this now. 2 of them are kind of negatives, and 2 of them are kind of like affirmative, right? So our duty is not to commit suicide, not to lie, and our duty is to pursue self-improvement and to embrace charity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like it's either something to be spoken, right? Once you have these answers, to speak them or to write them down. It's kind of like it has the blanks there, right? That you could,
Yeah.
like if is there an inscribing instrument here that?
So Lucia notices that in fact the words that are there have been kind of chiseled into that plate or that tablet that's on the bottom there.
Mm-hmm.
But there doesn't seem to be anything in the room with which you could do the same. It's possible that people have gear that might be helpful here, though.
Our scribe.
Or
I'm thinking our scribe might have something that.
Oh, do I really want to waste ink on this here?
right. I may need this for the next room.
Yeah.
Right? You're tricking me.
Yeah,
Would be like, I would imagine tinkering tools to be something like little like nuts and bolts and screwdrivers and things like that, right? So that probably wouldn't be useful in this context.
Aaron, exactly.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I do have. I mean, I have 3 uses of quill and ink and only 2 parchments. So, that's theoretically I have an extra use of quill and ink anyway. All right. Well, unless anybody in the party does have any other such tools like hammer and chisel or something like that, then I will get out my quill and ink, and we'll begin recording what we think of as our responses on this. So I think we're probably agreed that in the imperatives spaces, in one space, I will write hypothetical, and in the other space, we will write categorical. And I think I would write categorical in the right-hand space because it lines up with everything else underneath it there. Since everything else there would, based on our readings of these books as we've walked through, the other items kind of cascade out of the categorical imperatives rather than the hypothetical. And then formulas, I don't think I heard any disagreement with the idea that one of those would be the universalizability principle, and then the other would be the formula of humanity. So we'll put those there. That doesn't seem to matter too much which one goes where. Now the duties are the tricky one. So back at the reading here.
I think Lucia might have listed them for us. You want to repeat what you listed there?
Well, yeah, I just put it in terms of, because we were debating like whether it's just like the topic or or what, but I think you can in some ways encompass both by just saying, like, do not commit suicide, do not lie, and then something like pursue self-improvement and pursue charity, right? The first two are things, the suicide and lying are things that the books of Kant say that you should always avoid, and the self-improvement and charity are things that one ought to always pursue or embrace.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and record it in that fashion. To refrain from suicide, refrain from lying, pursue. What was it?
Self-improvement.
Pursue self-improvement, pursue charity. And then the last piece is going to be goodwill. So how do we want to phrase this? So the what we find in the book is where it says, we can now end where we started at the beginning, namely with the conception of a will unconditionally good. That will is absolutely good, which cannot be evil. In other words, whose maxim, if made a universal law, could never contradict itself. Now, I could, in very small writing, write that whole thing in there if we really wanted to. But can we kind of distill that down? Any suggestions for that?
Could it be as simple as just uncontradicting? Or is that too simple?
That might be too simple.
At least the way I view Kant, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I don't. But maybe the means are more important than the ends themselves. If you use good means, you have to have good ends. I don't know.
Or maybe it's something like the way in which you proceed to an end has to have the right kind of integrity or the right kind of intentionality. And if it does, it will lead to the correct outcome, kind of. Oh. Maybe something like that.
Well,
I don't know. I'm sort of with Brandon, like, how much do I really understand Kant? Probably not as much as I ought to.
While you guys are debating this, Violet is like looking back at the other rooms that we were like reading these giant shit, I lost all words now. The tapestries that have like stories on them. And I think her ear perks up when you say like "thou shalt not lie," and she gets like visibly like agitated, and she's like, "This is bullshit. Of course you can contradict yourself. Like Alethea tells us so. This is," and so she just goes and stands in the corner and sulks.
Take a character token there, Violet. It's too bad because like when we actually get to, if we had time to get to Violet's ethic and learn about the ethics of care, like care ethicists think that the absolutism of ethics like Kantianism is bullshit. So whether you meant to or not, your fictional portrayal of your character not only embodied your religion but also your ethics. So
Aaron DeRosa, you win.
I would do something like that, but so far I'm not seeing that Kant is too far violating my virtue ethics. All right.
Yeah, Kant is totally in Lux's wheelhouse. Right? Like, yeah. What else you got?
I mean, if you wanted something like really super short, you could maybe just put universal, non-contradictory. I mean, those are like two of the kind of key things about the goodwill, right? It's, the first part of it almost seems like almost circular, right? The will is absolutely good, which cannot be evil, right? That's, just kind of redefining it. But then he kind of gives the explanation that, right, it's a maximum which, if made universal, could never contradict itself, right? That's where you get the explanation of it. It has to be universal and non-contradictory.
Yeah, I'm kind of zeroing in on that piece you just mentioned that you said felt circular, but I think it definitely gets to it. That will is absolutely good, which cannot be evil.
Mm-hmm.
That if there is no way for it to be evil, then it is absolutely good.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I will write in that last space. Absolutely good, which cannot be evil.
Okay. So when our scribe, and so this is, so you have a basic move called solve a puzzle, which is what you all are doing. And we've had Adion describe that they are using their ink and quill to write this in here. Are there any of your traits that you want to pull in here while you're doing this, Adion?
I don't know that any of them particularly apply right now. This doesn't feel like a task that would necessarily tax my hands that never tire. So,
all right.
I will mark off one use of the quill and ink.
Good deal. All right. So you've used your quill and ink. Actually, I'm going to, as the GM, interpret that as you drawing on your occupation, which is a trait that you have. So go ahead and take a character token for that. And so when Adion inscribes this onto that plate at the base of the statue, Adion, you hear above you the pans of that scale that the statue is holding. You actually hear them move.
Huh. Okay, well.
What do you do?
Looking at them, do they, it being a balance scale, do they seem to unbalance in some way?
Yeah, so the pan on the left has dipped down below the one on the right.
Let's see if there's anything in it.
All right, so when you look in the pan on the left, there is a large iron key.
Hey, there we go.
There we go.
You also notice, because I mean it's not that big, that there's something in the right pan as well. In the right pan of the balance scale is in fact Kant's badge. It's a piece of parchment that has the scales of justice on it. And so this will allow the paladin to prove to others that they carry Kant's authority when they enforce the law.
Whoever takes it out, Violet runs over and snatches it out of their hand and sort of like crumples it up.
So Violet has Kant's badge.
I say no one deserves this. This is pure poppycock.
She has it until she burns it in a dragon's fire. Right. Then there will be no Kantianism in this kingdom.
I'm joining with the witch.
Good.
All right, well, We've got a key. Let's see if it fits this door.
Sure enough, the large iron key fits into the door at the back of the room. And if you turn it, it does unlock the door. What do you do?
I step back and let one of the burly paladins go first.
Yeah. I
Violet
take
jumps
out
in
my,
front and
my,
goes in
my,
first.
my 10-foot stick and check for trap. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You always have to check for traps, right?
You do have so your adventuring gear that everyone has. That is, so imagine that is a bag of just mundane adventuring stuff, like a 10-foot pole. That if you want to say you have something like that, you mark off one use, add whatever it is you have to your gear, and
Right.
you can use it. So you really want to have a 10-foot pole to stick it out there and check for traps, or put above you as you fall into a pit or whatever.
Violet takes the crumpled up badge and throws it into the room to see if it sets off a trap.
Good
Um,
idea.
So when Violent opens the door and throws Kant's badge into the room, what you see now, where you've been has been, the walls have been kind of carved from stone. It's clearly like a built by someone. Behind this door, though, is just like a cavern. And you throw Kant's badge into this dark cavern. Nothing appears to happen.
Okay, well, I'll, following the burly paladin strategy, I'll walk in, pick up Kant's badge, smooth it out very nicely, make everything as it should be, slip it into my pocket, and
Huge eye roll.
right, exactly. Have and have a look around this cavern. Are there additional statues? Are there additional scales?
As far as you can see, the cavern just extends into the darkness.
I will continue into the darkness. Well, with my torch, of course.
Are you going?
War probably has dark vision, so maybe Brandon can help us out here.
I do actually. One of my body traits is eyes that see everything. So I'll go first and then just kind of scope it out to see what's going on at the bottom of the tunnel.
Okay. I think we've got time to see what happens before we take a break. So normally, I would throw a die at my students and tell them to roll it. Brandon, if you've got a die there, if not, you can just open up like a Google tab and type into it, roll D4. Google will roll a D4 for you.
And I'm rolling. Oh, I got a 1.
All right.
Awesome.
So, the dwarf goes out ahead of the party, and eventually, up in front of Earl sees at a distance what looks like, from where you are, another large statue. But this, it looks nothing like the statue you've encountered. You just see a enormous, large form down the hall.
Okay. Could I use my eyes that see everything to discern reality and just try to check out the form and shape of the statue and just look at whatever is going around in the space of the cavern?
Yep, and take a character token for doing that. So what you see, you're studying this form, and it's not, it doesn't appear to be moving. It is the form of like a trying to find a word that's not human, humanoid. So it is, it's bipedal. It's got 2 arms and a head. It's just enormous. Like, it takes up the entire kind of like what you can see in the cavern. you can, as you're studying, see that it isn't standing in front of what looks to be a door, but it's not moving. So if it's alive, it doesn't have to breathe. It's very still, whatever it is.
The tinker in me just wants to take it apart, but but I suppose, I don't know. I would scope out the rest of the chamber and try to figure out exactly if there's any kind of mechanism that would unlock the door that's around there, or where the door is attached to.
All right. Are you doing that from where you are, or are you moving closer to what's going on down there?
I'll move closer into the cavern.
Okay.
Why not?
I think so. When Earl gets about, we'll say, within 10 feet of this, what looks to be an enormous humanoid statue, it suddenly moves, and it steps towards you. Just takes one step. So this thing. So we'll say the cavern's about, let's say it is 15 feet around, right, roughly. And it fills up this whole thing, and it takes one step forward, and it says, "You shall not! You shall not!" Oh, what's the use? And he starts to cry and just collapses down on the ground.
At that, I have no idea. At that point, I think I'm just gonna run out of there and high five the Kantian paladins on the way out, saying, "This is way too emotional for me. I'm a utilitarian." and try to go from there.
And I think that might be a good place to take a break. Earl has just run back to the group and told the paladins what he's found. What do you do? I'll say, let's see, we picked on one paladin already. Lucia, what do you do?
Well, I was thinking, Lucia, kind of hearing the situation, and do I see the figure down there weeping, or has he just reported back to me that?
So the cavern's pretty dark, so unless somebody has pulled a torch from their adventuring gear, only those with things like light vision can see anything.
Yeah, so I mean, Lucia would first of all just ask. Then it's Earl. Ask Earl, what happened? Why are you back here? You look like you're quivering in your boots.
It was a giant crying robot thing on the ground. Don't know what it means. Don't know what it wants, but it is. It's huge.
What did you do to it that has caused it to break down?
Nothing. I just walked up to it and it broke down, and then started weeping about half of a Lord of the Rings quotation.
Lucia would say, "I don't know why you ran away. Clearly, he's in some distress." And Lucia will really, without giving much thought, will kind of head forward with lantern or torch, and probably be also rummaging around in her adventuring gear for a large towel, which would be appropriate size for a large statue that is weeping.
All right, so you can mark off 2 uses of your adventuring gear. You've now got a torch and a large tarp/towel that you can hand to this guy.
I think Bug is following close behind and pulls from beneath his robe just a big loaf of bread, because he brought at least 3 with him, and hands it to Lucia, sort of encouragingly saying, "Oh, maybe he's hungry."
And Lucia kind of looks puzzled, but say, maybe that's good thinking. I don't know, but she'll take it and kind of head forward to talk to this large statue.
All right. So sure enough, when you get there, there is in fact a large stone humanoid crying in front of a door. So the cavern you're in just dead ends, and there's a door there, and this giant stone, we'll say golem for lack of a better term, is crying in front of the door.
So she'll kind of call to the golem and ask, why what is wrong? Why are you so sad? I've brought you a handkerchief because my friend said that you might be in a condition where you would need it.
So he looks up, and you can see that the tears have like carved channels down his like rock face. He's been crying so much, and he takes the giant handkerchief, and he says, "Thank you," and blows into it, and this just kind of like wind tunnel blows past you of kind of like rock. It's not rock and water, just kind of blowing past you. Little pebbles bouncing off you. He says, "Thank you so much." Hands the handkerchief back to you. It's sopping.
Now, I guess I would also offer up the sourdough bread. I don't know if stone golems.
He says, "No, thank you. I don't need to eat like you squishy folk."
But he's like halfway through trying to jam some bread in some sort of like golem crevices somewhere out, and stops when he hears this.
Yeah, and I think Lucia will kind of ask what's the source of his sadness.
So he starts to, when you ask that, his eyes well up a little bit, like he's gonna start crying again. He says, "I was put here to keep you people in, and what kind of life is that?" And starts crying some more. "My whole existence is to guard this door," and just crying all over the place. Water, rocks.
Brain the size of a planet.
Well, and I guess Lucia kind of wants him to maybe think ethically about this, like who put you up to this, and why are you doing this if it makes you so sad?
He says, "I was put here like all the other guardians. I've never known any other life. And I don't know if I like this one very much anymore."
Lux's perspective would be, what a noble calling, right? I mean, you may have found yourself here without, without meaning to be, but how important it is to provide, your patron, your employer, whatever, with good service and keeping things, in an orderly, structured way, the way that they ought to be, right? I mean, it's an extraordinary gift to be trusted with being able to do these things entirely autonomously. How you choose to do this is up to you.
Violet spits on the ground.
Yes. At least Violet doesn't spit on me, which we might get to by 11 o'clock. And Lux says, "I myself am a guardian, but not of a door, but of a town. And I it wasn't what I had intended my life to be. Certainly, it's not what my family don't really get it or understand it or why I care about it. But it gives great satisfaction to be able to provide service, which you're doing. So don't weep, Gollum. Take heart in the noble service you provide.
Is there a duty here that Lux is trying to appeal to?
Probably, but I didn't do my homework as effectively as I might have. So maybe you can tell me which duty I'm appealing to, so that I can go back and reread it to see if I can pretend that I've actually done.
So
I did read the directions very carefully, so I didn't do everything I needed to do.
I do think Lucia would want to add something and say, look at Lux and say that there may be something to what you say. But, she's also thinking about that duty for self-improvement. And right, she says, but, maybe, this seems like it may be a worthy thing, but it's rather narrow, right? I mean, to spend your whole life just standing in front of a single door and kind of making that your entire universe. She'll look at the golem and say, I mean, are there other things that you think that you might be capable of that would kind of allow you to kind of widen your orbit and kind of would allow you to lead an even more fulfilling life?
So when Lucia asked this question, the crying slowly dries up as the golem thinks about how he could be improving himself. I've always wanted to grow a garden. He manages to get that out between gasps of air, sobs.
A rock garden, right?
Ba-dum-bum.
What other kind of garden is there?
Well, I think Lucia would maybe look at Bug at this point, and I think wouldn't Bug have some being a vegetarian goblin? You certainly should know something about the growing of gardens.
Yeah, I think Bug sort of like rests his little hand on whatever part of the golem he can touch. Would normally go around for the back, but probably doesn't work very well. And pulls out of his pocket just like a few seeds and says like, I have found growing gardens to be extremely rewarding, and you can do it pretty much anywhere. I'm sure you could just walk a few feet out of where you are right now and just grow your garden, even at the entryway of this building, and still fulfill your duties as a guardian of this place, and also grow a really great garden.
So he looks at these seeds. Can you show me the way out?
Of course we can show you the way out.
Absolutely. Well, you just go there too. Yeah.
So I'll come with you then.
I point to the door. Let's go.
So
You've got a garden to sort out, and a door to guard, but from this other place.
So I'm gonna say that Lucia take a character token for solving a puzzle, since Lucia gave us the duty to improve oneself. And we'll say, this is really, I'd never thought of this before, so I don't think it's happen quite like this, probably because I haven't really played with people who are used to story gaming, but nice. But the way that Robbie set Patrick up there with that question, I got to work that in there somehow. But go ahead and so both Lucia take a token for setting Bug up, and Bug take a token for drawing on your traits. I don't know what I'm going to call that move, but that's got to be in there somewhere. All right, so the Golem has, if only temporarily, joined your party. Opens the door for you. Let's do. How about we have Adion? Why don't you roll a D8 for us and tell us what you get?
That's a 7.
7. All right. So we'll throw this in here for fun then. So the golem opens the door, and behind the door is pretty much just more of this cavernous, like darkness, if not for Lucia's torch. And up ahead, in the edges of the torchlight, you can see another figure. Lucia, what do you do?
Well, I think Lucia would. I mean, if I just can barely see the figure, I think Lucia would. Well, I think she would. Maybe this is her motif. She's gonna kind of turn to another character, and it seems like Earl is the one most equipped to kind of see in the darkness for us, and says, "Earl, would you mind scouting ahead again, and seeing what that figure is up to?"
I can do this, but I will run away. I want to use I'll use my eyes that can see again, and just kind of go deeper in and just look at, take the gaze of the figure and kind of discern what's going on there.
Okay. So you're kind of like inching forward and closely studying this figure in the darkness?
Yes.
All right. So go ahead and take a character token for using your eyes that see everything. And what Earl can clearly see, between the low light vision and the torchlight, is it looks to be like some sort of, at first glance, some sort of like warrior. But it quickly becomes apparent to Earl that this warrior is moving very kind of a shambling sort of herky-jerky movements, and does not look to be alive in any meaningful sense of the term. So it's shambling, some sort of undead shambling down the hall towards them.
So I think at this point I would ask the embalmer / necromancer, whatever, the violet character, if they wanted to come forward and maybe assess what's happening here, because again, I would like to take the zombie apart and reconstitute it, but that's probably not solving the puzzle. So I would call Violet in to ask tell her what's going on.
Violet's already pushing past you and just like, whoa. Cool. She thinks she's getting up real close, and she's not touching, but like from a like an arm's length, just like, what are you, friend?
So when Violet gets, we'll say, within 10 feet of this thing, it doesn't even seem to acknowledge you've asked it a question. Almost as if it has no cognition, no rational thought whatsoever, as if it's just working on instinct alone. But as soon as you get within that 10 feet, like the right arm of this undead warrior is holding a sword, and it just swings it down over its head at you. What do you do?
I would hold out Kant's badge if I still had it, but I just jump back and I think I try to speak soothing words, or maybe I notice that it's proximity that sets this off, and so I keep taking steps back until maybe it becomes subdued, and try to speak to it again.
Okay, so it feels like we're defying danger here. Are you pulling any traits in here while you're defying danger?
What are my...
Feels like you might be erring on the side of caution here.
I am erring on the side of caution.
All right, so go ahead and take a character token for that. So yeah, sure enough, you're right. Like, it is working pretty much on proximity. That when you get within about 10 feet of it, it tries to attack whatever's within 10 feet. The soothing words don't seem to really do anything. It just seems to be, again, like that whole instinctive, anything within 10 feet, I'm going to swing at it.
I have a shovel, and I have a coffin. I don't know how I have a coffin. Imagine it as a body bag, maybe. I take a step forward into the 10-foot range with my shovel drawn. Yeah.
Okay, so as soon as you step within 10 feet, that sword arm comes swinging down again. You've got your shovel drawn. What do you do?
Just knock it aside and step back again.
All right. Sure enough, because it's not really that tough of a foe. Shovel gets knocked aside. You step back.
And I turn around to look at my comrades and say, well, I don't know what to do with him. If I deal with cadavers when they are still, not when they are in motion.
I'll try something.
If you pledge him to duty and honor to death or something, so help me Alafayette.
Violet, love you.
I spit on the ground again.
Yes, but again, not on me.
No.
I think I'm coming out ahead.
I would never.
I will attempt to enforce the law by means of the Kantian badge. Okay.
What duty are you going to
Order this undead to submit to the Undertaker on the principle that that your life, if it continues to be of a longer duration, will bring evil rather than good, and you are disordered. So submit to the Undertaker, who will provide order. By Kant, I compel you.
So, is this could we frame this as some sort of like duty not to, what would it be? It feels like we're trying to universalize something here, that by this zombie acting as it is, we could not say that everyone ought to act as the zombie's acting. Therefore, it can't be universalized, and the zombie has a duty not to act this way. That's what it feels like we're kind of doing. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay.
Within my limited understanding, right?
That's what it sounds like. It sounds to me like it's a universalization of some sort. So take a character token for arguing with your badge.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the zombie doesn't seem to even register that you're saying words. And it just stands there and waiting for somebody to walk within 10 feet of it.
Can we walk around it?
Possibly.
And is it defending something?
Does Lucia have a thought? I think you're muted there, Robbie.
Yeah. Is there a door behind it that it's...
The cave, it looks like the cave just keeps going.
I think Bug turns to the golem that's with us now and says, I think our interests are mutually aligned here, where you're trying to get outside and we're trying to help you get there. If you could help us along that path by taking care of this strange figure, then I think we will both benefit from it.
So that clearly sounds like some Hobbesian mutual benefit talk to me. So take a character token there. And sure enough, the golem says, zombie no rational, zombie no think, Kant not care. And the golem steps forward and just smashes the zombie to pieces.
I scream.
The golem says, why scream, little one?
It was a living thing. It might not have been living in the way that you understand it, but it was living. And it is my job to study and to understand and to make that life right. You've destroyed that.
So the golem says, somehow the golem has intimate knowledge of care ethics. The golem says, what needs did zombie have that you satisfy? What relationship exists between you and zombie, little one?
I guess we'll never know.
True. And the golem goes smashing down the cave. Coming?
I spit and I cross my arms.
All right. Why don't we have... let's have Aaron, you want to roll a d4 for us?
He got a 3.
3. Okay. Okay. So after a while of walking down this cavern, again, you can see up in the edges of Lucia's torchlight a small figure kind of off to the side of the tunnel. Let's do Adion. What do you do?
No, I think I will. Are we considering this a monster encounter? Or is that
not in the technical sense of the move sheet, no.
Okay.
Still dungeon crawling.
All right.
although I should say, like, the monster encounter moves are there to kind of key in how you might make philosophical arguments. So you can of course use them while on the dungeon crawls.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Well, I think I am going to do that anyway. So I will use the monster encounter move number 1 and apply my ethic. And I will engage in the the friendliness virtue.
okay.
And, greet the figure. Hello.
So you can have you gone forward down the cave, or are you greeting them from where you are, like at the kind of like you can just see them at the edges of the torchlight?
At the edge of the torchlight. I don't think I'd get too far ahead of the party.
Okay. So you hear from the darkness, hey.
Yo.
All right. I think I would encourage the rest of the party to kind of cautiously move forward, get the light a little bit further down so we can see a little bit better.
And you can actually see before you even do that this figure has. So you're part of why you can see this figure is because they have a light source of their own,
Okay.
it's just coming from behind them. So you're seeing them kind of in silhouette. So as the party moves forward, you eventually come to a gnome who's in a large, comfy chair in front of a box with flickering lights and moving pictures, eating something from a large bag. What do you do? And I should say, behind him, there's also a door like you saw behind the golem.
Mm-hmm. I will, with my ethic of courage, or I should say, my virtue of courage, step forward and say, good gnome, what is't you watch?
Say a bit more to me why this is courageous.
You haven't spent much time with gnomes, have you, Ron?
Because he would appear to my eyes to be engaging in some kind of magic. This box showing moving pictures would appear to be some kind of scrying device to me, and even the chair might be a little bit alien. The idea of a kind of plush, comfy chair. So there's definitely something kind of unknown or other about this whole situation. So stepping forward into it would require a little bit of fortitude to insert oneself into that place.
Yeah. So yes. So good. So you're confronting some fear.
Yeah.
And in fact, yeah, the bag also is suspicious. It glimmers in the light like metal would, but it looks like a bag. So, and the gnome is pulling small slivers of something from the bag and shoving them in his mouth. So he's like speaking to you between crunches of whatever this is, with crumbs falling into his beard. Says, I don't know. I just turned it on and fell asleep. Some cartoon about kids getting sucked into some world with something called a dungeon master. I don't know. What are you doing? Oh, and take a character token for your using your courage, or rather displaying courage.
Oh, no,
If they're
that's-
watching if this gnome is watching the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from the 1980s, you ought to give him 2 points for one for talking to the gnome, and one for not for not losing his mind watching that cartoon. God bless. What a nightmare.
It would in fact appear to our players to be the 1980s Dungeons and Dragons cartoon.
Yeah.
Our characters wouldn't know that though.
No.
all right.
The gnome says, "Oh, hey man, why don't you just like? I mean, you look tired. Why don't you all just kind of just sit here with me, watch some tunes, have some chips? It's all good."
My friend, we are engaged in a task of momentous import.
Oh, that sounds
Yeah.
very tiring.
I'll actually step out of character for a second. So we found a badge of Kant. Are we, at this point, do we believe we need to find a second one, or are we just continuing to explore for the sake of
Oh,
exploring?
right. Let's say that, no, let's say that there were, sorry, totally slipped my mind. Let's say there were 2 badges there. So both our
Okay.
paladins have their badges. Now you are, simply exploring more or less to find your way out of this dungeon.
Okay.
But you found the artifact you came here to find. You've gleaned some knowledge from your early explorations before the first puzzle. And so now it's more or less getting out of the dungeon and back to the village.
Okay. So returning to the gnome. We have achieved our objective here, but now we seek to return to our homeland. And we perhaps think this door will help us get there. Have you any objection to us passing through this door?
So the gnome says, I mean, I'm supposed to have objections, but no, I don't. I really don't care. And he reaches down and takes the bread from Violet and gives it a little taste. He's like, oh, that tastes way too healthy. And reaches back in and shoves some more chips in his face. Says, if you want to use the door, I mean, but hey, look, it'd be way more fun if you just sat here with me, watched some TV, enjoyed yourself. None of this adventuring, momentous task nonsense, man. Just hang out. Why keep going? This bag of chips, man, never ends. It just keeps filling back up. I don't need to go anywhere.
I'm going to look over at my paladins and see if they have anything to say in response to that.
Surely, good gnome, there could be and ought to be more to your life than watching television and eating chips, or watching this magical box which provides you with the lowest level of entertainment. Come fishing with me, or join us, and come visit my sworn enemy, Violet, where the angel and devil, right? Surely when you were younger, you had a vision of yourself as being something in the world, something more than a mere gnome who sits on a comfy chair and eats chips. Now, mind you, I have no beef with an ever replenishing bag of chips. It's not the chips that are at issue. It's that all you're doing is eating chips. You have a duty to the world and to yourself to improve yourself to the degree that you can and to help others. So get up out of that chair.
Are you using your badge while you do this?
Of course I am.
All right. So
the power of Kant compels you.
So,
Yeah, but it's crumpled, so it's a little less.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. This is the third. The third duty, so far as I can understand it.
So
I think I'm gonna jump in just really quickly and kind of turn to Lux and mention, could this be some element of the fourth duty as well? He seems only concerned with his own happiness.
Ah.
Should he not be working in some way toward the good of others as well?
That's very compelling to me, and my angle was too narrow, so I'll open it up a little bit. You have this duty not only to yourself, but to the community of sentient beings as a whole.
So
you have more to offer than what you're offering.
So the gnome, like, as you've been speaking, his chewing of his mouth has gotten slower and slower, as if he's actually thinking about what you're saying and not just absentmindedly watching television. And or being put to sleep. And he goes, I did used to want to be someone, not this couch potato watching cartoons and eating chips. I wanted to clear the forest of the land, and I wanted to be a lumberjack.
Well, there's plenty of wood.
Um,
There's plenty of wood. Good work. I mean, look, we're all from Stockholm, and we could use some resources. So why don't you come and join us, chop some trees down, go fishing with me, spit on the ground with Violet, and again, no beef with chips. Bring your ever-filling bag of chips to town. I'm sure you'd be the talk of the rusty nail.
so
You know?
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
And he
All along.
rolls up his bag of chips, shoves it into his adventuring pack that looks like it hasn't been used for centuries, turns off the TV, slings the pack on his back. Let's go. And
as he goes, I'll just remind him that the next time he wants to go back to the magic box, there are any number of fine game shows from that era that are much more entertaining than what he was watching.
Earl is taking the magic box so he can take it apart and reverse engineer it. So I'm going to grab it and put it in my bag and take it with.
all right, add the magic box to your gear.
Nice.
Is it a 19-inch magic box in color?
It's like a black and white. I don't know what that would be. 10-inch, I guess. Is that an appropriate size for a TV? 10-inch? I think it is. I don't know, 9-inch, 10-inch, 8-inch, whatever the small
Yeah.
little black and whites were.
9, 11, 13, 19, something like that.
Sure, one of those tiny little black and whites.
So it doesn't weigh 86 pounds, is my point.
No.
Yeah.
All right, so the gnome opens the door for you. What do y'all think? We got about half an hour left. I have questions for you, so I would like to have a little bit of time in here to discuss. Do we want to try to have another encounter, or do we just want to find the outside?
We find the outside.
Yeah. So this cavern eventually leads from the darkness, and it opens up into a clearing. There are some the end of the cavern starts to turn into some sort of like corrugated metal, and you open up into what looks like a dried up creek bed. And in the distance, not far away, you can see the path back to Snowcalm. The golem takes the packet of seeds and plops down and starts to dig around in the dirt and plant his seeds. The gnome I think will travel back with you to Snowcalm. So the gnome's coming with you. Is there any last things anyone would like to do before we end our adventure? I'll just go around here. Cedro, is there anything that Adion wants to do before we head back to town?
No, he's good.
Lucia, anything to do?
I think Lucia, does mention to the golem and to the gnome that they should take care to keep track of how many plants have been grown and how many trees have been chopped down, because I'll be coming back. And I'm marking down in my census their names, right, that I carry with me, so that I know to kind of come back to them once their new enterprises have taken off and they're turning a profit, that I no doubt as the catchpole will need to kind of come by to collect my taxes.
Nice. Let's see. How about Earl? Earl doing anything before we head back to town?
I'm going to talk to the gnome about the dynamics of a recliner, and then promise to give him new tools in exchange for, part of his profits, which I will not pay taxes on.
Nice. Yeah, the gnome is happy to chat away about, oh, it was so comfy, man. I would just like throw this arm down and lay back. And so yeah, he's happy to talk about the recliner back to town. Patrick, is there anything that Bug wants to do before we head back to town?
I think Bug has a long conversation with the golem about how deep to plant the seeds and what sort of irrigation system he should be using for maximum yield if he wants to sell his products in town, and maximize his profit.
Nice. So he goes, okay, and then just goes back to whatever he was doing, like in one ear, out the other. Is there anything that Violet wants to do before we head back to town?
Oh yes, absolutely. I'm also talking to the golem, probably over Bug, or trying to. Apparently that's the persona that I've developed for this character. And I'm trying to get the golem to think about what they've done and to process this death and think about the garden as a way of creating life that they had, replacing the life that they had taken. And I forget who mentioned it, but talking to the lumberjack about, Robbie was talking about destroying these trees and planting a garden, and talking about like sustainability. And yeah, that's That's my lecture that I give.
Nice. Last but not least, Lux, are you going to do anything before we head back to town?
No. I think I'm good.
Cool.
Let others fill the space, kind of thing.
Nice. So, not that we'll get to spin them, but Robbie, Brandon, Patrick, and Aaron can all take character tokens for their little closing vignettes there, pulling their character traits into their closing stories. And we'll then call that a session. End Adventure 1. So,
No total party kill. Call it a
So, I'm interested in hearing if you all have any comments or questions. I did have is it just one thing, I guess, at this point? I felt like there were two things I wanted to ask you all before we kick this off. But I've only got one written down, so I'll just ask the one. So the random rolls you all made kind of determine where we went. The zombie thing was just to get students thinking about that for Kant, the ability to reason is all that matters. And so this kind of ends up being an objection to Kantianism that if you focus so narrowly on this, how can you account for all these limit cases where rationality is not there? So very young children, right? Who haven't developed rationality, the very old who might have lost their rational capacity. So that's what the zombie's there for. But the other two rooms are actually, as you all figured out, about the duties. The gnome is designed to be about the self-improvement duty. The golem is designed to be about the not committing suicide duty. But the thing is that what the move that Robbie made there, going to the self-improvement, my students have done the same thing, which is why I just rolled with it. Because if you're applying the ethic, good, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're showing you've understood it. I'm wondering what you all think about that. If you think that either that I should try to redesign it so it gets more specifically at the duty to not commit suicide, or just do it like we did it and just roll with it. So that's what I've tended to do, is just roll with it. But then you see, today we end up using the same duty in two different rooms,
Right?
Which I'm okay with, but I think it might maybe be more helpful to try to get the students thinking about all of the duties. I don't know. I'll just throw that out there if anybody's got thoughts on that.
So one of the things that I noticed. Sorry, were you going to say something, Robbie?
Well, I was just going to say that if it was the duty against committing suicide, I don't know. I think in some ways for me it would have to be pushed a little harder that he was having those and we were talking last week about how this could get into kind of area that would make some people uncomfortable, but he was obviously depressed and very sad, but I was initially thinking about that, but I was like, oh, that it's not quite where I was seeing him as suicidal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the framing of the conversation from the golem definitely felt like it was leading more towards the idea of self-improvement. So I think framing that conversation more in terms of, and you're in kind of an awkward situation there, in that this is a being that's been created for the specific purpose, and so that suicide would definitely be contradictory to that purpose. That it's created to guard this door, and expressing a desire to end its existence would be contrary to that. But I think you could maybe get around that by expressing the desire to end without the means to, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That he wishes he could just end this, versus do something better, because that felt like that was how it was framed at the time. Was he'd rather be doing something more or doing something better, which kind of I think was what led us in that direction.
Well, yeah, and another thing that may have pushed that direction was, because I was also thinking about the charity duty with like, oh, get the towel, and right, kind of approaching him that way maybe kind of got his mind thinking in a slightly different direction, whereas a different approach to him that was perhaps less charitable and more cold may have kind of allowed for the kind of suicidal thoughts to be more at play.
One of the things that I was thinking about with each of the encounters, once I started mapping them onto the reading, and I think Robbie helped trigger that for me, it became unclear how they fit into each of those categories. And so I didn't know if that was intentional. At the beginning, it seemed like that was intentional. And I think that there's something really valuable about presenting something very ambiguous through this reading and having students then say, this is the problem as I see it. I'm latching onto details A, B, and C, and not D, E, and F. And so that's why I pitched this solution. And I would imagine in a class where you have multiple groups, they might read it in different ways. And I think that that's incredibly pedagogically valuable. If your idea or if your desire is to get them through all of the duties and make sure that they check them off or can see them as distinct, and then get to a boss in which all of those things come to a head, because many of these things overlap, right? Like one can become suicidal if one feels no value in their work or doesn't feel like some of these other duties, right? So that might set up that boss encounter. But I was both thrown off by the lack of detail, but also I think that there's value in that for other reasons. So you can do with that what you will. It's not a critique, it's just an observation.
That pushes me towards the idea that because it used to be more clear what was going on. Like in the PowerPoint, for example, the rooms used to be labeled like, like, oh, it's the room of lying, right? So like the students knew like going in. So it was kind of like me saying, okay, make an argument now. And that just kind of got boring, right? Because there was no challenge to it for the students to figure out what should I do here. And so with the ambiguity comes this kind of like, well, sometimes they use duties that I didn't intend for them to use, but they do it in a way where it clearly demonstrates they understood the material. So like, I'm cool with that. And so, yeah, so like, I think what you say, Aaron, and what everybody else has said is kind of, it makes me think like, all right, well, I need to just be more okay with the fact that like, and we don't get to do all the rooms anyway, right? So like, I think I'm just going to keep pushing it maybe the path that we've been going where it is open, it's ambiguous, and it doesn't matter which one you use as long as it demonstrates understanding. So that's helpful. Yeah.
I think I would also add to that ambiguity is great. I would still add more detail. Let the details be diverse enough that there are multiple paths in, but not all the details are focused on this particular duty. So it'll still paint a bigger picture, but the range of choices that students have to choose from about what to pay attention to, that becomes more diverse. Yeah.
Brandon, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I would just add on. I agree 100% with what Aaron said. I think the ambiguity is actually really valuable. Like that's what I thought. Like when we were playing through it, my first thought actually on the zombie was that the zombie was actually the suicide route, right? Because you think about it, I was thinking about it, at least in my own head, that you're thinking about this is a being in such a decrepit shape that, death would be the best option for it. So how do I work an angle on how to save it, right? Trying to fall into that category. And I think that's valuable because obviously you're working on a whole different level of critical thinking when you're trying to work through different variable outcomes. My only suggestion would be, if you're going to have multiple groups, what I would think is that maybe try to overload the rooms with different groups towards different variants, right? So like first time you play, if you end up having 2 suicides or 2 charities or something like that, the next group that comes along, try to get them more loaded towards the other ones, so that when you have kind of a come together at the end, right, you can kind of compare your experiences and hit the different values that way, right? But I definitely think you should stick with the ambiguity. I think it works really well.
Yeah, I was really hesitant to go with the die roll on that and give you the gnome, knowing that it was loaded towards the same duty we'd already talked about. But I just like the gnome room so much, I went with it. But yeah, you're right. No, it's and like I said, in class we normally only get to do like one of these duty rooms, right? Because just we have such little time, and I'm floating around between 5 different groups, so it's not a problem that I see. But it was one that popped up here because of the way that I chose to go with that second room, as a could be going the same direction.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could describe, like, when you're talking about like how you do this in the classroom with the different groups, because like I can definitely see with the puzzle that I could, I can visualize how that would work, right? That you could have the whole class there, you have them divided into the separate groups, but then they could have their breakouts and kind of come back each with their own solution. But I'm wondering with respect to the other rooms, what that kind of looks like in terms of how you're managing that in the classroom.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. The puzzle is like super easy to like do breakout groups and bring people back and talk about it. The encounter thing, like the more social encounter rooms, I mean, it is literally me running between groups, and what do you do? They try something. I tell them what happens. I go to another group. I'm just pinballing around the room for that half hour or whatever we had for that encounter. It would be nice to have, as I think Aaron suggested, have some a student kind of help out with the NPCs. I hadn't thought about making that because this is this class has I don't know if I said this last time or not. It has a public speaking credit attached to it. So it would be interesting to have that actually be, built in a way of saying like, hey, here's one way they satisfy this credit. They're helping me run these encounters. I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting. I've tried to get, I mean, might be too much inside baseball for my department about my department, but there was a point at one point many years ago when I first started this, when there were different people in charge of my department, when I got a grant for this, and I had pitched like, oh, why don't I get a grad student in here that gets them some something they can put on their CV. I helped teach this class, and it got shut down pretty fast because people were skeptical of using games in the classroom. So I've had, but I like the idea of building it in as part of like the public speaking credit, because I could just get students from that class to help me out. So I like that. Because having assistant GMs would certainly help.
Yep.
Me not having to pinball around the room so much.
One of the things that I've been looking at as I've been prepping my classes for fall and doing remote course design, one of the articles I was reading was about like assigning roles in a group. And it's very much follows with the way that this game is constructed, right? Everybody has a particular way of acting, a particular role. Maybe one of those roles is the role of the GM that is supposed to be an expert, like they've prepared better than the others who are trying to work through the duties. And that person becomes in those 6 groups, you'll have 6 students, one at each table, that's sort of responsible for guiding that and then evaluating the outcome of that conversation, rather than putting yourself in a position where you have to guide every single conversation. It'll be messier, but then you can come back together at the end and say, here's what I'm looking for, or here's how I ran it.
It's interesting though, because so I didn't do this with you all just because we had more time, and I was trying to move the spotlight around a bit more than I would in the classroom. Like if this were the Kant dungeon, typically the paladin would be what I call the champion for the day, right? They're like the group leader. And so they're responsible for knowing the stuff. They're responsible for, if I call on a group and nobody's talks, like they're going to talk. But it's an interesting thought to kind of like take that a step further and make them kind of like an assistant GM instead of being the person responsible for solving the puzzles. So like knowing it better than everybody else in that sense, knowing it better in the sense that they're going to need to help me out in actually running the game. And that's also nice because it would set them up, because what the final presentation has become is them actually designing and running their own dungeon crawl at the end of the class. And so giving them this kind of baby step in at the beginning to being an assistant GM, I think would help with that too. So that's, yeah, no, that's a really good, I didn't get to see that chat that just popped up there. Rotate, so what Patrick said there about the GMs rotating, that typically happens with the, so again, that kind of supports this idea of making the champions more assistant GMs than kind of group leaders. That's interesting. Yeah. Super helpful. Thanks.
Ryan, a kind of a setting or framing kind of concept here. To the degree that you had us working on designing the village, the more you do that, the more I wonder about setting the entire adventure framework in the village. Okay. Meet your fellow villagers, talk to them. I suspect that if we were interacting with one of our fellow villagers rather than a stone golem, we would not have diverted down the path that we did. Totally legitimate, but I can appreciate as an instructor that you want a design that lets students grapple with everything rather than deeply grappling with one thing. That's an appropriate stance. The other is as well, right? Deeply grappling with one thing, and the rest you'll come to in time, right? But I think if I were making this, I wouldn't make it a dungeon crawl. I would make it it's May Day in the village festival, right? And the suicide person is someone who is socially left out, right? Or someone who has been hexed by the witch to think outside of the way that they normally would, right? The indolent person is indolent, right? That lets the catchpole maybe, right, say, well, look, the reason I keep taking your chickens is because you've left your farm half as waste, right? What's going on, right? And maybe it's the same person who has two things, right, that are interacting with that kind of thing, right? So, you had us make a village and then we immediately don't interact with it. Well, I would rather interact with it and the people in it.
Or I mean, another possibility would be you do the dungeon crawl as a kind of training ground, and it could be set up in a more structured way, but maybe the boss level then is when you come back to the village and you have some type of situation there that is really much more ambiguous and more complex, but you have some type of scenario there, which is the kind of culmination, is that return and having to deal with a more quote unquote real world problem involving the people in the village.
Right. That becomes the final exam. Don't design a dungeon crawl, but rather design story frameworks that take place in your village.
So they actually, so they have 3 major presentations. The second one is what you're describing, John.
Oh, I see.
So they do that. So the village stuff does come into play with so how there's the dungeon crawl moves and the monster encounter moves. The monster encounters are what you're describing.
Oh, I see.
But I still like the idea. I mean, this solves one of the things that I didn't like. So the dungeon crawls to me are very almost kind of more video game than role-playing game. So it's kind of like, here's this super artificial scenario that makes no sense why it's happening, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway.
Yeah.
But
it feels too much like a set piece, right?
Yeah, but I like the idea of like, hey, let's go crawl this dungeon. Let's do this puzzle. Let's get this artifact. Now let's go back to the village. And hey, here's somebody who's got this problem that relates to what, this is about. So instead of encountering the stone golem, they go back and encounter somebody in the village, right? I think that does, that if I can do it right, that does get at one of my worries about this feeling very artificial in terms of the dungeon crawl stuff.
I think
Yeah.
I think it's kind of built into what you're doing too, and maybe it's just a matter of like reframing the setting just slightly. Like instead of a dungeon, this is a mansion, right? Like you're trying to find, the governor or something, because the governor gives out these certificates, and that way it makes more sense when the golem and the gnome follow you back, right? If there were people under the employ of the governor, they're still townspeople. It makes sense that they are now rejoining society because you've pulled them out of whatever servitude they were under. That way it's still the same kind of like, yeah, you're a teacher, right? Like you have to railroad this in some capacity. But it also creates greater connections so that every subsequent week can tie in encounters that they've had elsewhere. And those NPCs can follow them too, so that golem is there when they're doing Hobbesian social contract stuff, posing other ways of like Kantian ways of thinking about that same problem. And they have to say, yeah, that worked over there, but not over here, right? And that I think if it stays within the town, that feels less artificial than now we're an adventuring party over here. But of course, doing that changes it from the sort of like classic D&D dungeon crawl adventure-y thing to something more powered by the apocalypse narrative based, socially organized, integrated kind of thing.
Yeah, it stops being module B1 and starts being module B2, right? A classic dungeon crawl or more like an environmental wilderness kind of jam, right? Because, if we were in the town, when I said, come fishing with me, well, I wouldn't be in a dungeon, I would be in town. And I could say, okay, I'm going to take him to the river where I find the fishing really good. I'm going to give him my pole, right? That kind of thing. And then we could have had a conversation, maybe to go deeper into where, kind of his headspace. How did you get to this point in your life? Because certainly if you're teaching university, there's going to be plenty of 21-year-olds who feel like, how did I get to be 21 and now I just feel adrift, right? Like I'm going out to bars all the time and I'm not doing what I think I ought to be doing and this and that, right?
Yeah, no, this is completely in line with some of the changes I've been making already. To this, it's a move from D&D murder tourist like mindset to a more like, honestly, it's trying to move it. The only comparisons I have are things like Studio Ghibli, Stardew Valley, that sort of like cozy slice of life kind of stuff that the game's been slowly moving towards. But the stuff that you all are suggesting is basically just like, it's kind of like saying, like, why are you moving so slow towards this? Just do it, right? Like, stop crawling dungeons, just make it villager encounters. Like, just talk to people in the village. So yeah, no, this is all, A, makes perfect sense, and B, is super helpful. So
what I will say, sorry, let me just quickly respond to that if you don't mind.
Okay.
Like that is something that you should think about too, right? Like if we're pushing you to move this into the village, you do lose the fantasy, you can lose the fantasy component. And if that's the way that gaming works in your classroom to put these things to put these ideas on display in a way that if it's their friend, they can't quite do it because it's their friend, right? That's the flip side there.
yeah.
Sorry, Sudro.
Actually, I'll let Sudro say what he was going to say before I respond to that.
Well, I was going to actually go in the direction of kind of moving back into the dungeon crawl idea, and especially working with what Aaron just said about if you want to keep that kind of fantasy role playing, the classic fantasy role playing tropes in there. I found it interesting that our goal in going to the courthouse was to obtain the badge, and that happened in pretty much the first room we came to, and that then we had to solve the other puzzles as it seemed on the way out. But it felt more like we were going deeper in, and that's just from a DM's perspective. It was kind of a structure question of, I didn't understand necessarily why we didn't just turn around and leave once we had the badge, instead of going into this other room to keep exploring deeper. That if we had this specific goal, that maybe the badge is something that happens later. But again, that's just mostly about structure.
The artifacts used to come way later. It's another one of those things where I was saying it's super artificial. It feels like a video game. It does feel like super railroady. The artifacts used to come at the end, but what doesn't happen then, which this is more about the pedagogy than it is the gameplay, is that students don't have the opportunity to actually use the artifact like you all did when you used Kant's badge to convince people to do things. So that was why the artifact got moved to the front, and it got framed in a different way. You're right. It's super, narratively, it makes no sense. Why wouldn't you just turn around and go back out the way you came in? It's another one of those aspects where it just feels like more like a video game than it does a role-playing game, right?
Yeah, and I felt like it might be more about how the characters, especially with the paladins, would have to demonstrate some kind of knowledge or fealty to those Kantian ethics as a way of earning the badge, rather than using the badge itself to demonstrate those, but to show that they understand those categorical imperatives, that the guardians are really there to guard the badge. And again, this is like more about kind of story than anything else, but it's more about Aaron's comment. It would be more about and a little bit into the pedagogy of it, of demonstrating that understanding, that once you've demonstrated that, then you get that badge. But I definitely see how you're saying that it does feel kind of artificial.
Yeah. Although, what you're describing is not as artificial as what you're describing makes more sense in the D&D kind of dungeon crawl terms than what I don't like is what I've done. And so it's kind of funny. So I like all these suggestions because these are ways to fix what I've done. So yeah, it might be worth thinking about moving the artifacts back to the end instead of the kind of beginning. And also just to kind of go to what Aaron said there about what might happen if we make it more social and open it up. One of the things I kind of like about, so if I do these as traditional thought experiments, again, it's very much a railroady, you either do A or B, right? You can't decide what you want to do. You either pull the lever that sends the trolley down one track, or you don't and it goes down the other track. You have nothing in between, which is good for trying to do certain things, but I find it way more interesting for them to just let them do whatever they want and then ask them, why'd you do that? And so I'm actually okay with kind of losing that bit of the learning if I gain this other bit that I find way more valuable. So I'm actually down with the stuff you all are suggesting about kind of moving in this more narrative sort of form. Yeah.
It's worth thinking about, at least.
No, I mean,
instructional design perspective, right?
Yeah. No, I really like this. I think this is probably going to happen this semester. I'm going to take a baby step in the sense that the dungeon crawl concept reading quiz thing, that's going to stay. But then what comes after is going to go back to the village. Mm-hmm. I like that. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but I like that kind of suggestion, taking the social stuff back to the village. So
you could have your players in the village design process design a ruin or a whatever. I was talking about the witch. You put in the witch's tower, right? Make wherever they go connected in the story in some way, so that create an adversary, right? Oh, it's a cyclops, it's a witch, it's a blah blah. What does it matter, right? Okay, well, that person has a place, and you go to that place to do that reading quiz, which gives you an object that you can take home to, right? And then it feels more organic. And I think that for people who are not native role players who can sort of fill in those gaps, the tighter the framework of the story, the more likely it is they will be able to get into and stay into character.
Yeah, for sure.
The last thing I'll say, and then I have to go, is that one of the things that I love, I adore what you've done here. Like, this is really like fun. As a literature professor, like, I believe in the power of fiction to access things that we can't experience or can't know from reality, right? Like, there's something about imagination, and there's something different about the thought experiment as a philosophical or sociological like engagement. But what you're doing is you're creating story, and you're creating participation in that story, but it's also a story outside of our experience, so that this isn't me, but I'm going to still behave like a person in a world. And it very much mirrors how we engage in the professional world once we like move on. You go to work at Google, and there's an environment there that you have to learn and figure out how to navigate that while also navigating, right? So there's so much like embedded in this kind of gameplay, and I think that that's really coming through. I think it makes these thought experiments far more interesting and connects them in really valuable ways. So all these things about like structure and how you're like how you guide and how much detail and how like all that's great, and it's going to contribute to making that stronger. But I think this core concept of gamifying these scenarios, I think, is really, really fun. I think you've done a great job with that.
Thanks. And I'm stealing that analogy between world and work. So that was nice. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, guys. It was good playing with you all.
Great pleasure.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, it is. We are after 2 now, so if anybody needs to take off or wrap up or whatever.
I also have to go, but on my way out though, I want to reiterate what Aaron just said. It's a great thing. It's a lot of fun. And the one thing I would say is that I wouldn't abandon the fantasy tropes in a lot of the ways, because I think it just works really well with the philosophies that you have, right? I mean, like the knight is a Kantian, right? I mean, they live by these ironclad value structures, right? And I think it works really well. My thought about integrating more village would be just make the village into a town or a city, and just have different elements of that city be unlocked through different quests, right? I mean, like kind of more of an exploration that way. And I think that would provide a more organic kind of experience. If you look at it that way. That'd be my only thing. No, it was a lot of fun, Ryan. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I think expanding on what he just said, I think that part of the overall value of the setting is that it does give the students more of a simplified kind of context to think about those questions in. It's kind of a jumping off point for it that doesn't involve, the complexities of the real world, but also in many ways kind of a lot of the controversies of the real world. And so I think that's one of the things you mentioned early on, was that it really does give them, for the in a personal way, it gives them somebody else to explore those questions from. But I think the world is at least as important for that too. That they have this fantasy world, but they don't have those kind of deep investments in various belief structures or whatever, and so using those relatively simple situations to explore those questions in, I think, is really valuable. And Robbie, you'd put a comment up in the chat about the giving structure, more formal order. um, making it more manageable. So, and I think that's the balance too. Is you get, there is an artificiality to a dungeon crawl. It just is. But sometimes you might have to embrace that for whatever reason, and maybe it's artificial because somebody created it. It's not just a random ruin that just has these random things, but the encounters we had today did feel very purposeful. It really did feel like there was some ancient Kantian who said, in order to demonstrate your understanding of these, you have to encounter these things, and it was placed there to do that. And it does start getting even more artificial as each of the ethical systems has some adherent somewhere that's built his own little dungeon for it, but there are ways to approach that. But no, I would be really interested to start thinking about how to adapt this idea, because I think it really works extremely well for something like philosophy, where you've got these very specific kind of abstract questions that you're thinking about, that you can frame in these thought experiments. And that's how, my one semester of philosophy 101, that was how I saw it going. You had these thought experiments. We see in the reading how Kant puts together, okay, well, here's this situation, and it allows the students to explore those situations. And so then trying to adapt this kind of structure to something like an English class or something like a history class, be really interesting to see like what you would need to do to make this idea work in those other educational contexts.
Yeah.
I think another real value of the way that you're doing this is having it divided up into these adventuring groups where there's this kind of social and collaborative thing that's going on within the group. They can see that, oh, right, people who have different kinds of philosophical frameworks that are kind of driving their sense of ethics, you start to see how they are behaving differently, right? Or how they're kind of thinking about these situations in different ways. Although kind of at the same time, you might, it also, I think, makes you aware that, okay, two different philosophical frameworks may approach this differently, but it's kind of interesting to see how they might also end up at the same point in terms of sometimes, in terms of the decisions that are being made. They can say, oh, that we have like the same decision being made, but our kind of thought process as to how we kind of got there was different because I'm thinking about it as a utilitarian versus you're thinking about it as a Kantian, right? But then also just the fun interaction that kind of goes on as you're kind of solving the puzzle, or people are kind of thinking about like, okay, what might you put somebody on the spotlight, but then, if they have the party there, right, that there's a kind of interesting kind of social dynamic that can get added to the mix, right, which makes it, I think, engaging as well as kind of keeps like everybody kind of involved in the kind of thought process.
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing how it goes.
Yeah,
I appreciate all of the comments and thoughts and suggestions, and not to mention the playing it, right? So, this was super awesome. Thanks again, Robbie, for putting it together.
Oh yeah, thank you, and thank you all for joining us.